The Horror Chronicles. Lower the lights, and let's begin. In the villages of northern India, there is an old name for what a wronged woman becomes after death. They call her a Churail. She returns to the family that destroyed her, and she cannot be prayed away because her grievance is just. You will know her by one detail the old stories always insist on. Her feet are turned backward, so that her footprints always point the wrong way. Remember that. You will need it before this story is over. This is the tale of the Zamindar's daughter. Within 11 months, between the winter of 2002 and the winter of 2003, a family that had ruled its village for 200 years ceased to exist. 3 deaths, each one impossible in its own way. A woman found dead of fright inside a room that was locked from the outside. A man whose car was discovered crushed against a banyan tree on a road he had sworn never to drive again, the doors still locked from the inside. And a man killed by poison in a cup of water drawn from a vessel that 10 other people drank from and lived. The police closed every case within days. The village never opened them at all, because the village knew exactly who was responsible. And the village knew she had been dead for a year. But a tale like this does not begin with the dead. It begins the way these tales always begin, with a girl. Her name was Meera, and everyone who describes her in this story uses the same word. They say her father and her 2 brothers loved her like a flower. Understand what that means. A flower is adored. A flower is watered, tended, displayed, shown to guests with pride. And a flower is never, under any circumstances, permitted to leave the garden. Meera was 19 years old, the only daughter of the most powerful man in a village in western Uttar Pradesh, and she had never in her life made a single decision that was hers. Her father was a Zamindar, and if you have never heard that word, no single English word will carry it. Landlord is too small. Under British rule, the Zamindars were hereditary lords of the countryside, men who owned entire villages, collected the taxes, judged the disputes, and held the lives of everyone on their land in the palm of one hand. The system was abolished by law in the 1950s, but laws travel slowly down dirt roads. 50 years later, Thakur Raghuvir Singh still lived in a haveli of 100 rooms, still owned the fields in every direction, and still expected the men of the village to step off the path and lower their eyes when he passed, because most of them still did. He had 3 children. Vikram, the eldest, was his father poured into a younger body, proud, cold, and patient in the way that dangerous men are patient. Ajay, the youngest, was different, soft where the family was hard, and he loved his sister with the uncomplicated devotion of a boy who had been raised in her shadow and never minded the shade. Between them bloomed Meera, kept behind the high walls of the haveli, her marriage already being arranged to the son of another landowning house she had never met. The date was months away, the garden was closing in, and then, in the spring of 1996, a new worker came through the gates. His name was Santosh. He was a stonemason, 23 years old, hired from a neighboring district to restore the crumbling east wing and the family shrine, whose carvings had softened under a century of rain. And here is the detail the tale never lets go of. Santosh was a Dalit, born at the very bottom of the caste order, which meant he spent his days rebuilding, stone by stone, a temple he would never be permitted to enter and pray in. He worked from first light to last. He sang quietly while he worked. And one afternoon, from a shaded window above the courtyard, Meera stopped to listen. It did not happen quickly, and that is what made it unstoppable. A glance held 1 second too long. A question about the carvings, answered with more care than any servant had ever offered her. He spoke to her, the tale says, not as a flower, not as a Thakur's daughter, but as a person, and she had waited 19 years to be spoken to like a person. They began to meet at the old well behind the orchard in the hour before dawn, when the Haveli slept. He told her about the world beyond the fields. She told him things she had never said aloud to anyone. And by the time the mango trees blossomed, they both understood that they were carrying something that could get them killed. Because in that world, what they were doing was not a romance. It was a crime against blood. And one evening, a washerwoman crossing the orchard at the wrong hour saw two shadows by the well and stood very still and slipped away without a sound. They never learned whether she told anyone. They only knew they could no longer wait to find out. The betrothal ceremony was 2 weeks away. They ran on a night with no moon, a bus to the district town, where a temple of the Arya Samaj, a reform movement that will marry couples across caste, joined them as husband and wife, before a fire and 7 witnesses who did not know their names. And then a train, second class, unreserved, rattling south through the dark toward the one city in India big enough to swallow them whole. Mumbai. 20 million people. No Thakurs, no garden walls. The tale gives them 6 years, and it insists the 6 years were happy. One rented room in a worker's chawl. Santosh on construction sites, rising to foreman. Meera learning for the first time the ferocious pleasure of an ordinary life. Cooking on her own stove, choosing her own clothes, walking to the market with no one's permission. And in the 2nd year, a son. They named him Kabir, after the poet saint who spent his whole life mocking the walls of caste. And he grew up loud and fearless in the city's noise, a boy who had never seen a village and did not know what a Zamindar was. Meera would watch him sleep and feel the old world dissolving behind her like a bad dream. But the old world was not dissolving. The old world was searching. It found them on an evening in November 2002. A knock at the door of the room in the chawl. Meera opened it, and her legs nearly failed her. Standing in the corridor, thinner than she remembered, was her little brother, Ajay, 6 years older, eyes already wet. He did not shout. He did not curse. He looked past her at the small room, at the toys on the floor, at the husband rising slowly from his chair, and he said the words the family had sent him to say. Come home. Father is old now. Mother cries for you every night. For you, we will swallow our pride. For you, we will tolerate the disrespect. All of it. Only come home and live near us again, and let this wound close. And here is the thing the tale wants you to sit with. Ajay was not lying. Every word he said, he believed. His tears were real, because the message he carried had been placed in his mouth by people who knew that only real tears would open that door. Meera looked at her husband. She looked at her sleeping son. She thought of her mother's voice on the telephone these past months, soft calls traced to the village, full of longing, begging her to believe that time heals even this. And after 6 years of looking over her shoulder, she wanted so badly to believe it that she did. She said, yes. 600 miles to the north, in the village she still dreamed about, the lights of the Haveli burned late into the night. Her family was preparing to welcome her home, all of them. And in the east wing, beneath the shrine that Santosh had rebuilt with his own hands, Thakur Raghuvir Singh sat with his eldest son and spoke, quietly and carefully, about exactly how the welcome would go. Part 1 of The Zamindar's Daughter ends here. Part 2, The Homecoming, returns in 2 days. Subscribe to the Horror Chronicles so it finds you. Sleep well, if you can.